Hey, this is the World Advice Channel too. What I want to talk about today is the truth about the Luigi Mangione situation. And what I'm going to be talking about today is a life lesson that people can learn from this situation, which I'm certain we're all familiar with Luigi Mangione situation. He's a guy who killed a health CEO person and he's become a martyr as a result of that. And what I want to talk about is, of course, like I was saying before, is a lesson that people can learn from the situation. Okay? Uh, and not just a lesson, a life lesson for that matter. Okay? So now that I mentioned that, let's get started. So when it comes to Luigi Mangione, the person who we all know is famous for killing that health CEO person who was charging um you know a bunch of money for a lot of people who urgently needed medical care. He killed him for that matter, okay, and he's now become considered a hero as a result of that. Which, let's be honest, the healthcare CEO, I'm not saying he should have been killed, but let's be honest, he kind of brought it on himself, to be kind of blunt and honest with you, with how much he was charging people for even things like penicillin, if you have diabetes and all this type of stuff out there. He brought on himself. Everyone, I think, at this point, logically can admit, yes, you brought that shit on yourself, okay? But the truth of the matter is, to be quite honest with you, at the same time, we also have to learn that there's a lesson to learn from a situation, okay? And what the lesson is that all of this whole situation, when it comes to the price of healthcare, or I should say the extreme high cost of healthcare, could have been avoided if people actually listened to, guess who? Barack Obama, who promised to have free healthcare. Because the thing that always amazed me about the free healthcare thing that people always like to hate on all the time, saying that, oh, it's communism slash socialism and stuff. Yet we have a country up north, known as Canada, where I actually live, that has free healthcare and has had free healthcare for the longest time. And it's definitely not a communist socialist nation, for crying out loud. We definitely are not, for that matter. But aside from that, back to America, the truth of the matter is, in America, they believe Luigi, they believed when Obama was trying to release free healthcare that it was a bad idea on so many levels because, first and foremost, it was communism slash socialism, like I said before, and also, of course, let's not forget it was going to cost taxpayers too much money. Yet at the time, they had no problem with President Bush and Dick Cheney, at least the legacy that they left when Barack Obama took office, which now the legacy has kind of died down. But yeah, the legacy of terror that they left when America had to pay over $10 trillion for the wars that they had in Iraq and Afghanistan. They had no problem with that, whatsoever. The amount of unnecessary money that was spent on that war. But here's the thing, they have a problem with healthcare being free because apparently it's going to cost so much money, which is so stupid, but that's what they thought. It's going to cost a ridiculous amount of money to taxpayer money. Make that make sense, for crying out loud, okay? So in short, to answer your question, no, it wouldn't have costed too much money to have Obamacare if they actually had it. But at the same time, a lot of the American public didn't like it anyway. They thought it was communism, coming to America, it was going to destroy America and all this type of stuff. And simply put, it didn't listen, And the thing is, the issue is, it's not, is, and this is the thing what people need to understand, okay? Okay, at least for me, okay? And at least us old school liberals before the radical new liberals have taken over and ruined fucking everything, okay? We are not expecting people to agree with us on everything. But what we are expecting is for people to at least do their research and actually form a logical opinion instead of just being one of those types of people who just hear something and they run off with it and they form an opinion when they didn't even get all the information. Okay, that is the truth of the matter. At least historically, how liberals, for the longest time, from what I remember, before the mid 2010s when this woke shit came up, you know, um, that's how we were historically were like. You don't have to agree with us on everything, but you definitely have to at least form a logical opinion by getting facts, and the facts were definitely in the favor for free healthcare. Okay, but people didn't want to listen. People just want to say, "Oh, it's communism or socialism. We don't really need it," and people quickly turn on Obamacare, and it eventually caused a lot of problems. Now, fast forward to 2020. Five, I believe this is the year when the shooting happened, either this year or last year. Um, you know, for that matter, now people have to rely on some random person murdering someone to feel good about the high cost you know, of medicine that they have in America. But at the same time, all of this could have fucking been avoided if you guys actually let Obamacare actually happen. Okay, because at the end of the day, America's a nation that it's actually some real America. Not even just in general, the fact that they're literally a nation that even in this day and age is developed and have cities that have murder rates that are similar to that of places in third world nations, for crying out loud, let alone the fact that America, just to add to that as well, you know, um, you know, is a country, you know, that if you get injured, you can get like a toothache, for example, get a missing tooth, and now we have to pay you have to pay more like tens of thousands of dollars for a bad toothache, you know, you know, that you got. Like that's ridiculous. You could get a small injury in America and pay thousands, 10,000, some cases even $100,000 for a minor injury that could be solved here in Canada easily through free healthcare. Like, how make that make sense? It's like it sounds like something from the medieval ages, and this is the fucking 21st century for crying out loud. How the hell does that happen? And that's what I'm trying to say here. But that's how America's like. You make a small fucking mistake, you're kind of fucked. Just like in the past, you fell down, you scrapped your leg. It's kind of like, yeah, it's a guarantee you're screwed because you're gonna die from this from an infection. While in this age we live in, it might not be dying from an infection, but you're kind of screwed in a sense because now you have to pay anywhere from thousands to tens of thousands of dollars for a simple small injury, which is so ridiculous. But that's the truth about living in America. It's ridiculous. It's weird, but it's actually true. I would have never, especially growing up, ever believed that was true. Growing up in Canada, I would have imagined America being a developed nation, and not just developed, but the world's most developed nation wouldn't have things like this. So, but it's the way it is. And that's the thing that I find so weird. Like, it's a developed nation and the most powerful nation, and it still has this type of stuff going on. Like it's still the medieval ages for crying out loud, where if you did have an injury, it did cost a shitload of money, by the sense of the time, and even in America today, it still costs a lot of money, you know, and the standards of time, of course, meaning how much people would be paid, but it's not even any different today, you know. Fast forward hundreds of years later, so that's the truth of the matter. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to get across here, okay? Because all this could have been avoided if they just simply supported Obamacare, but a lot of people want to support Obamacare. Let's keep it real. Not because because there's anything wrong with it, but because he was black, and a lot of people just simply didn't do the research, okay? So if there's a moral to the story is, actually do research on things. Don't be someone who just says, oh, I'll just form my opinion on something without getting my fucking facts first. You have to use your head to survive in this world, okay? You have to use logic, and through logic comes wisdom, you know, for that matter, okay? You have to actually just form an opinion through logic, not be like one of those stupid women in school, a lot of those stupid people, and just stupid people in general. I don't even want to get in those type of people who just form an opinion and they say, well, it's in my opinion when you question them on it. If you have that entire way of looking, of thinking more like, then you're going to have problems in life. And now we're seeing as a result what happens when people have that way of thinking with how much shitty the world has become compared to maybe 10 plus years ago. And a lot of it's because a lot of people are entitled to their beliefs and they don't want anyone to question it, which is so dumb, but it's the truth. So in short, to answer your question, all this could have been avoided if we had free healthcare or I should say, they had free healthcare in America, but people don't want to listen. So the lesson is that instead of just taking something and running off with it, you have to do research and learn, about something instead of just forming an opinion and saying, well, you can't question me on my opinion on it. And that's the truth of the matter. But a lot of people didn't do it, so now they have to face the consequences of it. They have to pay a shitload of money for silly injuries that in other countries you could get resolved easily, and they have to rely on this person who, let's be honest, from his writings, is kind of crazy just to feel good, you know, that he actually did something to them when all this could have been avoided if they just had free healthcare from Obamacare. But at the end of the day, people don't want to listen and they have to feel the pain. And that's really the lesson to learn. So, in other words, form an opinion through facts, not just from how you feel. And that's all.